Good morning. Welcome to Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist Congregation on this last Sunday in January. Our theme for this month has been radical hospitality. So whether you are long-term members who remember life in the triple wide, or friends who found us online during the pandemic, or new members from last week's ceremony, or people who are still checking us out, we welcome you with radical hospitality. And that, of course, includes the folks who are joining us from home. Let's take a moment to welcome them with radical hospitality by turning around to wave to the camera. And we can see up on the screens up front who is joining us. Hello, Mary. Hello, Bill. Joining us from home, and there are others there as well. Okay, I'm Deborah Roberts, and I am a lead pastoral associate here at MVUU. I want to take a minute to thank the many people who make this service possible. Our AV crew, our greeters and hospitality crew, and our musical director, Chris Tackett. I also want to acknowledge that there is so much that happens during the week and behind the scenes that contributes to the running of this church. I'm thinking of our board, and since I live with the president, I know how much time and effort is expended by this hard-working bunch. I also think of our pastoral care committee under the leadership of Sally Wistrand, who is currently supporting several members of our congregation who are very ill. They spend a lot of time in this endeavor. And I don't want to forget our committee chairs who participated in a council meeting here yesterday afternoon. Thank you all. Not only is today the last Sunday in January, but it is also the 5th Sunday in January. Who knows what that means? Pulpit Palooza, yes. Okay. The Baja 4 ministers exchanged pulpits for the day. And Reverend Matthew, our called minister, is at Sierra Vista today. And we have the great pleasure of radically welcoming Jamili Omar, who is the director of Lifespan to Faith Development at the UU Church of Tucson and also with the Baja 4. And as of this year, she is our Baja 4 ministerial intern. She's in her 4th year as a divinity student at Star King. And this internship is one of the final requirements for her to finish her program and become an ordained minister. Many of us already know Jamili from her creative stories for all ages that we enjoyed during our online Zoom services. Complete with animation or starring her daughter. Jamili will be showing up in many different ways over the coming year. She loves learning from children, youth, and adults, especially the lesson that it is important to always keep learning. Jamili grew up in Michigan, but considers places with mountains home. I guess Tucson qualifies. Currently, she lives with her family in Tucson. Please consider yourself radically welcomed. Okay, Jamili will be talking to us about superheroes and principles. All superheroes have an origin story, a moment when their identities shift from being average to being super. Unitarian Universalism is entering what could become another origin story for us. It's an exciting and frightening time that may also be filled with grief. She will explore this beginning and ask and answer the question, what might it bring?
Thank you for that wonderful welcome. I truly am grateful that I get to do this internship here in the Baja 4. It is my home. Our call to worship this morning is written by Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, who I serve with over at the UUCT. She wrote this. I could not have written it better, so I just stole it. Okay, I asked her for my permission, but we're going to hear it again today. Science fiction author Octavia Butler wrote about the tenants of a place called Earthseed. The tenet, the central truth of this place called Earthseed is this, quote, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Now, let's imagine we're a world where this is accepted as truth. Not a truth that is hard to swallow, but a truth we live our lives by. A truth that orients our minds and shapes every action we take. How would our world be different if you met every change as if it were divine? If change came your way and you said, hey God, good to see you here. I am blessed by all I change and all that changes me. Imagine that big, scary change came your way and you greeted it with a hug, with a sigh of relief, not out of spirit of optimism, but out of gratitude. Gratitude for being part of the dynamics of creation, for which we are always changing, we along with creation. In this spirit of approaching change with new minds and new hearts, come, let us worship together.
Okay. We are going to light the chalice today with words by Julianne Lepp, Open to Unexpected Answers. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths.
Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still thy goodness prove. Come, thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come, thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
We've invited our children to stay with us today because I have a story for us, and I'm going to need your help. So would you be willing to shout out maybe some answers or help me a little bit? If you feel comfortable, you get to choose. You all are welcome to, of course, share this story. Now, this is a once upon a time story, and I love once upon a time stories because sometimes they are factually true and sometimes they're not. So this story starts once upon a time. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a woman named Rabia. Now, Rabia lived in a village. There was no electricity. This is a long, long time ago. There was probably no indoor plumbing. So, if you needed a drink of water at night, you had to go out to the back 40, get your water. So, Rabia lived in a little hut. And one day, she's out in the street. So, if this is our street, here's Rabia. And she's out there and she's clearly looking for something. What would you do if you lost something and you were looking for it on the ground? What would you do? You would light something? Yeah, you might need some light. Yeah, I would get my flashlight out, but she didn't have a flashlight. So she's there in the street and she's looking. And so one of her friends comes up to her and says, Rabia, what are you looking for? And she's like, oh, I lost my needle. A sewing needle? I lost my needle, and so I'm looking for my needle. And can you imagine, this is a gravel road, so there's lots of dirt all around, and she's looking for her needle. And so her friend joins her, and her friend is looking for her needle. Then another friend joins her and looking for the needle. And another friend joins her and looking for the needle. And they're looking and looking. And meanwhile, the sun starts to go down. And the friend says to her, okay, Rabia, this would be really helpful for us. What question would you ask if somebody you knew lost something? What question might you ask them? Where were you last? Exactly right. Where did you lose the needle, right? And they're all standing in the street looking around for this needle. And Rabia says, oh, I lost it in my living room. And the friend says, why aren't you looking in your house? Exactly. And Rabia says, but the light out here is better. I can't see in my house. I wanted to look where the light is better. And all her friends did that exact same thing. Yeah, why don't they go look in the house where she lost the needle, right? It's like your shoes in the morning. Go look where you put your shoes last. So Rabia says, I lost it in the house. The friend says to her, well, why don't we go look in the house? You silly, silly woman. Why are we out here looking for this? And Rabia says to her friends, isn't this just like you? Looking in the wrong place for what you've lost. Your God is not here. Your God is here. So let's remember, as we're searching, where is the thing we're searching for? Thank you. Chris. There we go. So our children this year are working through very, very slowly through a curriculum. Our kids who just left are working slowly through a curriculum called Superhero Academy. Our hope is that by studying superheroes, our kids are going to learn that they are unique, they are powerful, and they can make a change in this world. In superhero stories, a superhero usually has an origin story, the transition story that a character makes from their normal self to their super self, usually prompted by some cataclysmic event. Can you think of any famous origin stories? The one that comes to mind first for me is always Spider-Man, because that spider bite caused him to take on his superhero powers. Can you think of any others? Shout them out. Write them in the chat. Superman, Kryptonite when he came, Batman, Wonder Woman. Any others? Do you have any from the chat online? Any that you can think of? Superhero origin stories? The Incredible Hulk, Gamma Rays. Wonder Woman. The Fantastic Four. The Baja Four. Any others from? In a way, everyone has an origin story, right? A time when you were one thing and then something happened. That something could be big or little. It could be unexpected or not expected. It could be a fast change or one that took a series of time. And then after that thing, you're different. Think about parenting, recovery, adulthood, elderhood, gaining or losing faith. These are moments that change us and help us develop the superpowers for our next part of our story. One of my personal origin stories is that in early 2001, I had just finished graduate school for the first time and had moved to a new city for work. This was the second move I had made in 3 years, and that meant that I was again without community, and I was lonely. I sought a community that valued social justice, human rights, and free thought. And so that year was the first year I walked into Unitarian Universalist Church. The first time I walked in, I felt completely, utterly unwelcomed. Between the standoff nature of the congregants, the Jewish and Christian symbology on the wall, and the Protestant ways of worship, I was pretty sure it wasn't the place for me. I was a young, introverted, questioning Muslim. It was another place I was not enough, not outgoing enough, not Christian enough, not the place for me. But I tell you what, those sermons, I was electrified every Sunday by the ideas the minister offered. The sermons were intellectual candy, and I could not resist. So I continued attending. I even volunteered for the church for a bit. But I never once in that time said, I am a UU. In fact, I barely even told people I went to church because it was so outside of who I identified as. It took several more years exploring other organized religions, other life changes, some other moves, before I finally understood this faith. My origin, the cataclysmic event that brought my superheroes, or at least here, right, was around 2013 when I was teaching religious education to my then 4-year-old son in a UU church. At that point, I learned about the theology and Unitarian Universalism claimed me. See, we were teaching Spirit Play, which is a Montessori-based curriculum. We were focusing on the 7 principles that year. And so it was in explaining those 7 principles to the 4-year-olds that I got it. And so what did I learn? These principles that I taught to these kids said in tight, precise language what I already believed. They said what I already believed. They articulated them in a way that I could not. They say in words what my heart, my soul, and my inner compass tells me is right. And in that moment, this faith captured my heart and soul. My bet is that most of us here have a UU origin story. That moment where you said, I am UU. So here's what I want you to do. In a minute, when I say go, I'm going to invite you to talk to a neighbor or think silently to yourself if you're an introverted like I was. So maybe you went from, I attend a UU church to my parents are UU, or I grew up here, to finally saying, I am UU. Or if you joined us older, or maybe from a different tradition, that moment when you said to yourself, oh, this is where I belong. If you're new or visiting, what brought you here today in the first place? So I'm going to ask you to share with a neighbor, preferably one you don't know, but you're welcome to talk to somebody you do know. You can share as much of your own story as you want. Make sure you share your name, though. Those of you in online, those of you in online, you can either talk to each other, so unmute and share, or use the chat, however you feel most comfortable. We all good? Okay, go. Thank you for this lively and engaging conversation. I know, right? I thought Chris's playing would do that. Did anybody hear the underscore that Chris just played for us? Did you hear what song it was? No, Chris? Anybody recognize it? Say it. Yeah, it was the Superman theme. Yay! So, quick show of hands, how many people either heard or told a story that involved our 7 principles? You heard or told a story that involved the 7 principles. Show of hands. How about in the online on our Zoom? We have a couple. I mean, my story does, with very, very clearly right in there. So I have a challenge for us. Now, don't pull your phone out. No Googling. No Zoom, Googling, you online people. Can we name the 7 principles? Shout them out. Oh, you gotta hide. Cheating. Don't look. Don't look. Well, what are they? Respect for spiritual, inherent worth and dignity. Okay, we got inherent worth and dignity. Democracy. Hi. Interdependent web of all existence. Seek the truth and love. Democratic process, we got that one. Justice and world peace. They're kind of lofty, huh? We see the actual wording. I think we got most of them. Inherent worth and dignity of every person. I worked with a minister once who said that was the only one she learned, because the acronym is IWAD, I-W-A-D, inherent worth and dignity. So she remembered that one, and she had none of the other ones. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We sometimes mix up interdependent with, there's another interword, interrelated? Bonus points for the 6 sources. No, we won't do the 6 sources. But the 6 sources and the 7 principles are in there together. And the list of principles and sources closes with this paragraph I want to read to you. Quote, grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. So an origin story tells us of a moment of profound change for the hero. Unitarian Universalism, as you've heard me say a couple times today, is in the process of another origin story, one that has potential to create seismic shifts in our faith. We will have a before and an after, and it has to do with our principles. We already know that the principles are being discussed. In fact, UUCT, where I serve, is one of about 232 congregations that has adopted the 8th principle. We have about 1,000 in our denomination total, so you can do the math on what percent that is. Does anybody have a rough idea of what the 8th principle is? You don't get to say. No. I see a hand back here. Oh, that's a nice summary. Do what we say we believe in. Does anybody else have a summary? Yep. Yeah, Christian, do you have? That's what you were going to say? Okay, so let's take a look at the exact wording. We covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So that's the 8th. So I think we had the spirit of it in there. So this conversation has been happening, right? The spider has been released. The box has been opened. The event, which is going to create our next origin story, has begun. So what do we know about it, and how did we get here? Our principles are contained in one section of our association's bylaws called Article 2, Principles and Purposes, obviously. Our lofty religious language, our statement of our highest ideals and aspirations, is found in something as mundane and bureaucratic as our governing documents. Last week, I was trying to explain this Article 2 controversy to a friend who wasn't UU, and I said, this is probably one of the most controversial and boring debates in history because we're arguing about bylaws. For the most part, people in nonprofits don't talk about our bylaws unless we want to do something that is in direct opposition or support of our bylaws, or we're at annual meeting, and then we talk about it a lot. And as a nonprofit, the UUA is in this quandary. Our bylaws explicitly state that we must revise Article 2 principles and purposes. Now, this point is outlined way down. It's in Article 15, right? So 2 to 15, plus there's like 30 or 40 more. It's called Amending of Bylaws, and it is way down in section 15.1.c.6. So if you can imagine this document, we are way down. It is line 1726 of the bylaws, just to give you some context of where this is. It says, quote, if no study of Article 2 has occurred for a period of 15 years, the Board of Trustees shall appoint a commission to study Article 2. So 15 years. Now you might be asking yourself, when was Article 2 last revised? No. Yeah, it's more like 35. So I have not lived through this history. So I want to read you a letter from our UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray. She put out just a couple days ago on January 18th. She published a letter titled, Why Change Our UU Principles? So I'm going to quote from her extensively because she knows and I don't know. She writes, quote, we are currently in a multi-year process, so this is not something that's going to happen overnight, to consider changes to our UUA principles and purpose. The process formally began in 2020 when the UUA board appointed an Article 2 study commission. So this commission was appointed by our board, and you'll hear them referred to a lot, the Article 2 study commission. Our 7 principles and 6 sources, which we know and love, were adopted in 1985. They went through this process from 83, 84, and then they were finally adopted at GA in 85, General Assembly, our big annual meeting. They offered a substantial, even radical change from what preceded them. The change came through the efforts of UU Women, particularly the UU Women's Federation, to push for gender equality and Unitarian Universalism, support for women in the ministry, to eliminate sexist language from our bylaws. So this was a really important change that we made in 1985. When had the bylaws been adopted or revised before that? Does anybody have that? 61, on when we merged, when Unitarian and Universalism associations merged. That was the last time. And in 1961, we had 6 principles. 85 added our 7th. So the interdependent web of all existence did not exist in our consciousness until 1985. According to Reverend Susan, we adopted our original in 61, substantial revisions in 85, and those changes have shaped how we inhabit Unitarian Universalism today. This is our origin story. This is one of our origin stories, right? But just like a superhero, our character is ready for the next chapter. What happened to our superhero between 85 and today? Nothing substantial, not with the bylaws anyways. It was in the 2010s, Reverend Susan tells us, that the ground began to shift again, much as it did in response to the women's movement. So the emergence of Black Lives Matter movement, the election of Donald Trump with his racist and misogynistic campaign, the calls in our country to confront white supremacy, even in our own movement. All of these compelled UUs to ask questions about whether our principles reflected fully who we are and who we need to be going forward. By the 2017 General Assembly, there were multiple grassroots efforts to change our principles. The first was overwhelmingly adopted. So we changed prophetic women and men to prophetic people to honor gender non-binary language. There was also a proposal to change the first principle, which did not get accepted. The idea was to change inherent worth and dignity of all people to inherent worth and dignity of all beings. And the delegates at that General Assembly said, we can't even handle inherent worth and dignity of people. Let's not deal with other beings just yet, right? And maybe it's already folded in the 7th. But this is an example of our democracy in action. We have processes, we follow our processes, and sometimes the things we want don't get passed. Reverend Susan tells us that discussions of the 8th principle were taking place in 2020. Hundreds of UU congregations have adopted it, including mine. The 8th principle recognized the need to go beyond aspirational principles, so things that call us to look to the future, to articulate commitments for now. What actions do we need to take today? So this is the context of our current Article 2 Study Commission. So this is all stuff that's been happening largely behind the scenes, because I can see some of you thinking, why didn't I know all of this? There's been a challenge in communicating. There it is. And so it feels like it's been behind the scenes. Now we need to talk about it because we have General Assembly coming up soon. So they've done 2.5 years of study and conversations with thousands of Unitarian Universalists. The Article 2 Study Commission submitted their final report just January 20th. So that's what, 8 days ago, 9 days ago? So this is hot off the presses. We're getting brand new information. This spring, so the next steps in the process are this spring, congregational delegates and the board can propose amendments to the current proposal. So they're still taking amendments, and they will be considered at the 2023 General Assembly and require a majority vote to be accepted. If any of the delegate amendments are accepted and the proposal receives majority approval, the Article 2 Study Commission will take any necessary changes to create a final draft for consideration at 2024 General Assembly. So we're a good 1.5 years right now away from any final vote or approval. Lots of time for us to do our own study, right? And today, I want us to take a first look, a first pass at what's in there, what the commission has recommended, so we can make our own evaluations. And I want to invite us into this next part of the conversation as Reverend Susan does. She writes, enter our conversations with a spirit of curiosity, holding off on attachments to outcomes, and listen with our whole hearts to the fullness and diversity of voices in our community. May the process itself deepen our understanding of and commitment to our faith. Just like it was in teaching those 4-year-olds that I fully got it, maybe it's in talking through these ideas we can get it. Okay, so with all of that in mind, what does the report from the Article 2 Study Commission say anyways? You might have heard of this. This might be brand new, but what does it say? Before I give you my 5-cent tour, and really we're just going to skim the surface, I want to make a disclaimer. You can give me, you can give Reverend Matthew, you can give Stacy, you can give your pastoral associates, you can give your neighbor any feedback you want. We are not on the commission. We cannot take your changes anywhere. So if you really want your opinion to be heard, at the end there's a slide that has an email on it. You are welcome to email them directly. You can talk to me. I can't make any changes. You can also become a delegate to GA. I know MVUU is trying to get delegates together, and talk to your friends. This can be a really excruciating conversation at the dinner table. Why not? You know, talk to your friends about it. And I wish we had time to get on the details, but we don't. You may or may not have gotten a sheet. This is the Article 2 proposed revision. It should say draft across it, but I couldn't make that happen. So let's take a look at this image. This is on your sheet at the very bottom. This is the graphic that the Article 2 Study Commission is passing around to visualize how they're thinking about this revision. So the word at the top and the word at the center of the graphic is love. And then down the left side, the words are interdependence, equity, transformation. On the right side, it says pluralism, generosity, justice. And if you have your good glasses on, your distance glasses on, you can see that in the middle of these colorful swirls are those same words: interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. I want us to sit with that for a minute. How do you feel? How do you feel about these words, about these changes? How do you feel about what you're reading? This shape they've intentionally drawn to look like a pinwheel to indicate movement and flow and evolution, growth, change. What do we gain when we have these words and these descriptions? What do we lose? How do we stay in community as we grapple with this enormous origin story as it comes at us? So here's a challenge when you have time, not today. Our 7 principles that we have now, this budding 8th principle idea, are in here. We could do a crossword puzzle or a word search where you circle the word in the newspaper. Where are they? They're in here. So I would challenge us to see if we can find them. And then sit again with this idea of, well, how do I feel about this? How is this going to impact me? The commission knew that we would have big feelings, and so in their final report, they wrote, quote, "Whenever there is change, there is loss, and where there is loss, this is grief. We honor the fact that there is loss in changing what has become familiar to us. We're also mindful that we need not lose everything. You may have noticed that many of the words and themes of our current principles remain in the new Article 2, just in a new format." So I want to say explicitly and directly, it's okay to say that these changes make you feel all kinds of ways. Maybe grief, anger, sadness, joy, excitement, confusion, especially if you're new with us. What are we talking about? It's also okay to say you don't feel anything. All that you feel is welcome here with us. So here we are. We know our origin stories, and we know that our hero is once again at a crossroads. We are making new choices. We have the opportunity to become anew, but change will be hard decision to make. All superheroes have hard decisions to make, right? I know someone here will know this story better than I do, but in Superman, there's a point where Superman has to decide, do I stay in love and stay with Lois Lane, or do I save the world? And because he loses his superpowers by love. I don't know how that happens. He had to make that choice, and it was an impossible choice to make. We're in the same moment. We're in a moment where we have to make a choice. The choice isn't whether we change or not. We're going to change. Change is a part of life. And we don't know what the outcomes will be. Maybe our children will know those outcomes. But how we make this choice, that's what's up to us. Maybe we start by asking ourselves some of the big questions. Maybe we ask, where does my bliss, my happiness, my purpose, my meaning, my divinity lie? Like the Rabia story, are we looking in the principles for that, or are they things we already have inside of us? Maybe they don't come from the outside. We need to ask, what ultimately are we loyal to? Are we loyal to the words on the page or to the spirit behind them? Are we loyal to the, quote, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations? Growth means change. Some growth will be uncomfortable. All growth will be new. Can we and will we allow our denomination to also experience spiritual growth? Are we loyal to the democratic process as we have established in our bylaws? This is our democratic process. Are we loyal to a fair up and down voting of the issue at hand without the taint of misinformation? Are we loyal to holding each other as we grieve the changes as we experience this faith? Are we loyal to our own personal, free, and responsible search for truth and meaning? Are we loyal to each other? How can we do this hard thing together? So we know we must grow and change and adapt, or we will perish. Octavia Butler teaches that. Remember, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Amen, and may it be so.
Give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
The purpose of this community is to help its people grow. If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if none of us had changed since the day we came here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be. Because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. So well may it be.
I have two announcements before we finish today. The first is, you have probably saw out in the Covenant Hall that our RE group is selling Valentine's cards for $2.50. You can purchase one and they will even mail it for you. And the proceeds from this, they'll be here next week too. The proceeds from this will go towards the OWL program, Our Whole Lives. The second thing is that we do not pass a collection plate here, but as you exit the church into the oasis where there will be coffee and refreshments, you will see two bowls. There is a wooden bowl, and that is for our charity of the month, which is Contigo. Oh, the wooden bowl is for the work of the church. I'm so sorry. That's what keeps the lights on here. And the straw basket is for our charity of the month, which is this month, Contigo, and you heard about that in an earlier services this year, earlier service. So we conclude today by extinguishing the chalice. This piece is called I Put My Faith in You, and it's written by Anya Samler Michael. 5 women with their arms around each other, outdoors and viewed from the back. I put my faith in you. I put my faith in every one of you who woke up this morning with the weight of loss, manifesting as numbness, anger, fear, or an alienating, aching pain. I put my faith in you, and I pray that you will put your faith in me. We need one another now, because we will not make it alone.